freedom. It'll always be freedom.
Hi, everybody. This is Miranda Webb from Anarchapulco for Conversations in Anarchy. And I know it's been a while since y'all seen me, but ain't no way we're having Brother Ali on the podcast and anybody on this team but me doing the interview. Anybody who knows me knows that I pretty much exclusively listen to Brother Ali, and that's been about the same thing with my autistic ass for the last 10 years. And the reality is, the music we listen to and the art we engage with in this world, it kind of determines what happens inside and as a result around us. It's absolutely essential. And until I started listening to Ali, I didn't really understand what lengths rap could go to, because what most of us are exposed to is, it's good music, but it's a little bit more shallow. It's a little bit less with the connection. So this is, for me, it's a dream come true. We are partially having him because at this current time, because we're doing a giveaway. I'll give more information about that later, but for the Blood on Beats course, which I personally did a year ago, and it changed everything for me for the better. So I want to hop right into this. Brother Ali, how you doing today?
I'm great. I'm happy to be talking to you. Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for an hour about it, and I've info dumped on people like, no, you guys don't understand the genius that this man is. So thank you for taking the time, especially so suddenly. We kind of tossed this together at the last minute, but because Blood on Beats starts on Sunday. So I just want
And
to
it's
kind of
super cool for you guys to fund the giveaway, because this was the first time that usually sells out right away. This was the first time where I'm really noticing that the cost is the thing that's holding people back. Like just not
yeah.
being in America, I did not realize how much people in America are struggling financially. And
Yeah,
just
that's
also,
something we've noticed too as an event. So I hear you.
yeah. And I think part of it too is just what people are focusing on. I think people don't necessarily realize how much we need art right now. People might feel like art is far down. So it's like, well, the world's too chaotic right now. You know what I mean? I'll focus on art once I get a sense for what's going on. And it's like, okay, spoken like a person who has not given themselves the gift of self-exploration and expression yet.
Yeah.
It's a really important revolutionary act, especially when we're just being inundated with other people's stuff all day. It's really, really good to be able to explore and express ourselves and have a community to do it in.
I think another thing that's worth mentioning, because I mean, I'm sure you remember I was basically probably the least experienced person in the last year's cohort, just because it was like a impulsive move for me. I rap along to your music, but I had never written anything myself, and I was like, I mean, I have to do this, right? But most people, even people that love your music, they're going to look at that and they're also going to be like, hey, man, this is for people that already know what they're doing. This isn't for somebody like me. And that's part of why I wanted to do this interview and to help promote this, because I got so much out of that course. Even though, like, I mean, I'll admit it, I haven't managed to keep a practice. My life got crazy in a good way after, but my life got crazy after. But the effect it kind of had on me, in particular, about the autobiographical aspect, about telling your story through your art and how the importance that is. There's a reason it's called Blood on Beats, right? Can you speak a little bit more about that and what the course has to offer?
Yeah, well, it's a 1 month program where me and my team basically we stop the other things that we're doing just to really focus on giving back, sharing what we've been able to pick up along the way, about writing songs, specifically hip hop songs. And so it means that we have usually have two cohorts because we try to keep the group small because we want it to as much as possible feel like a community. So if we just had 100 people all in a group together, you're not really tracking each other's progress and getting to know each other. Whereas if you keep the groups to 20, 30 people or something like that, people can actually, see each other's progress and get to know, like, okay, these are the people I'm in here with. And then with each of those cohorts, we have 2 hours every week of live time together. So I have certain subjects that I want to talk about, and I come and present those, and then we have live question and answer. And then I give writing exercises and prompts and things like that, so that throughout the week people have something to work on. And then we have a Slack channel where we leave each other voice notes and post what we're working on. So it's a chance for people to get feedback on their work, whether they've got songs they've already written and want to share with people, or just like, okay, like you're in a situation where you're like, I've never done this before. So, everybody is in it together. And, there are people that probably think that there may have been people that are posting rap music that they've made, but most people now do not get the opportunity to do that in an in-person community. Whereas, when we were coming up, we had to find the hip hop people in whatever city we were, and we had to connect with them. We had to build a network of people because it wasn't the mainstream. And so, there's a lot about creating within community that is just really good. And it's there's a therapeutic element to it. There's a group therapy kind of element to it. The reason why people go to anonymous programs to be with other people going through the process. It's not detached from spirituality and religion. It's not detached from politics. There is a really deep, like, radical thing about being that vulnerable with other people that you feel like are strangers. Also, there's something about hip hop very specifically that, as at least the way that we talk about it, you can never talk about hip hop without talking about the fact that this is the beautiful music that's been given to the world in this time to help us all survive what's happening in the world. And it's given to us by the people that have gotten the worst of postmodernist life, of colonial life, and that, like, Black Americans and people in the Caribbean and throughout the African diaspora, like, this is a culmination and a collection of all the beautiful things that, with all these dehumanizing systems that we have, nobody's been more dehumanized than Black people objectively in the last 400 years. And for the people that the whole rest of the world seems to be making a profit off saying, you're not human, they're not human, don't look over there, nothing to see there, they're just a work labor force that we should be afraid of. Um, you know, to be basically giving the entire human family this way to connect with our heart and our soul and community and the divine and everything else is like, you know, that's really central to it as well.
Yeah, that's one of the parts of the whole course I found the most interesting was really kind of tuning into that history. And I've kind of always been both fascinated by and respectful of Black culture, African culture in particular. And then recently, I'm sure you've heard of this book. I listened to the audiobook of Roots, I think by Alex Haley. It's that book, like that shit had me in tears when I realized it was his family's history and hearing about that verbal tradition that's passed down of, you know, your father or my grandfather was this and he was brought over here on this boat and you need to remember that. And like it's easy to look at the culture, modern Black culture in the United States specifically today and be like, yeah, but they're not slaves anymore. Why are they mad? But the reality is, like, it was not that long ago. Like, it really wasn't that long ago that they were ripped out of peaceful communities, beautiful communities. Like the way that book starts talking about his life in Africa and like the way they had their community and the naming ceremony and all the stuff that they had set up and all this stuff that you just wouldn't expect, the idea is, oh, they're just stupid, they're not people. But like so much of our culture comes from that. And most people don't realize that. They're like, why are you focused on race? Why are you focused on race? And it's like, I mean, I even a friend of
It's to
mine,
be,
go ahead.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's to be focused on humanity. I mean, we're talking about the first human beings. We're talking about the mother and father of humanity. So, all of the things that human beings do were started there. And what's interesting was both, you know, a little complicated about reading that book, but it's also there's also a lot of good news in it too, is that so Alex Haley actually was sued for plagiarism.
Really?
There are large, that doesn't mean it's not true, but there are large sections of that book that he actually really seemed like he basically lifted from a white European American writer. There was a book called The African. So it actually was research that this white American man did, and Alex Haley had to pay him a big settlement. However, that history that man uncovered, that white man uncovered, is actually true.
Hmm.
And it's so true, in fact, that the main character that's talked about in Roots is a person named Kunta Kinte.
Hmm.
Kunta Kinte is a position in that family. So the Kinte family is a real family that still exists to this day in the Gambia. And in every generation, the leading like male of the family is Kunta Kinte. And in this generation, I know the person who is Kunta Kinte of this generation. He's alive and well in the Gambia. He speaks English. We go and visit the Gambia almost every year. And he's a real person that you can visit if you go to Banjul, Gambia. And if anybody wants to visit him, like hit me up. He's an elder man. So, I don't know how much longer, none of us know how long we have, but there is a living person who is in the role of Kunta Kinte at this moment. So it's very, very real. And yeah, when we say it wasn't that long ago, I mean, it's still going on now. Like the
Hmm.
reality of like, you know, anti-blackness, white supremacy, oppression, systematic oppression is still going on now, especially when you look at it's like, where do we start telling the story? You know what I mean? So with Palestine, we're going to start the conversation at October 7th, 2023. We're not going to start the conversation in 1948. We're not going to start, like, where do we start the conversation?
Right, right,
You know what I mean? Are we going to start the conversation when Salahuddin, the Muslim leader, reconquered Jerusalem for Muslims, and where Christians had been ruling it, and he found that there were no Jews there. The Jews had been expelled, and Salahuddin, the leader of the Muslims, said, "You can't have Jerusalem without Jews." Like we need to like actually pay Jewish families to come back here. Like we need. So it's like for Muslims, that's our memory of Jerusalem and of that land. So it's like, where do we start the story? If we start the story in slavery, where like that's your beginning, then yeah, one could argue that it's gotten better. But if we start it with the great Mandinka tradition, if we start it with like the tradition of people that literally were kings and queens who had amazing lineage and spoke multiple languages and memorized entire, libraries, like memorized them line for line. You know what I mean? The first people to do astronomy and architecture and art and, science, and the first people to do surgeries, and the first people to, you know, it's like, man, then if you look at, well, like, if we start there, has any of that been replaced? It's like if I steal something from you, like Malcolm X said, if you stick the knife in 9 inches and then you pull it out 3 inches, don't tell me that's progress. If I come and steal everything you own, and then for 400 years, I get to benefit from it, and you have to watch me taking what's yours. And then I say, okay, I'm not even going to use this stuff I stole from you anymore. So it's over. And you say, well, like, no, where's the part where I get back what I'm owed? Where's the part where I'm paid for my labor? It's like, oh no, we're never going to do that. We'll give you a month, and we'll all quietly sit through a month of hearing what happened to you. You know what I mean? And like, yeah, we'll sing your songs, and but that's it. So it's like, okay, in that sense. if you think about like, okay, not when 9/11 happened, 3,000 innocent people were killed. It's one of the worst things that ever happened in recent history. It's terrible. Uh, the feeling that so many people that the American government and military had that like, okay, those people were just from America. They were just Americans. That's the only reason they were targeted. And so the response to that was to go to countries that had nothing to do with it. Iraq, Afghanistan, the only thing was that they had the same religion. They even speak the same language as the people
Right.
that supposedly did 9/11. And there's so many weird questions about the official narrative of 9/11. But it's like, okay, let's just believe the official story. What does Afghanistan have to do with that? They don't even speak the same language. They're just both Muslim. They killed 1 million people in response to those 3,000 people. 3,000 innocent people were also killed just because of who they are during lynching alone. Just the lynching period in American history. And somebody was just lynched a week ago in America, in Mississippi. So it's like, just in that time when lynchings were, that was 3,000 people. So if, when we start to look at like, and what's been the retribution for that? What's the payback for that? Because when that happened to, mainstream America, they killed 1 million people in response to that. So yeah. Anyway, I'm a big proponent of if we're going to be in, if we're gonna to engage in somebody's cultural production with in a way that's divorced from the people and from the reality that created it, that's deeply dehumanizing.
Yeah. Yeah, I also experienced that living in Mexico because there's a deep indigenous culture here, and to see the effect of like, and then the way the Mexicans tell the story of, I'm in like Mayan country right now, and I hear the stories of the Spanish coming over and just essentially trying to abolish Mexican culture. And from what I can tell, the biggest thing the Spanish have done is if you're Mexican, you can go over to Spain and in 2 years they hand you a passport and just because you're Hispanic, and it's like this is a worldwide problem of these, superior cultures going into other places and just fucking everything up. Like in
Yeah.
such a huge way. It's kind of heartbreaking to see. But it is also beautiful to see in which all of these cultures still find ways to find the beauty in life. Like I just saw, I know it's a tourist thing to do, but I was in tears. I chose Mexico. Not many people get to choose the country that they feel pride for. I've never felt pride for a country before, as an anarchist, certainly not for the United States, but like to see a show in which they went state by state and showed, the traditional dance, like, the drum guys in the Yucatan doing their beats sounds pretty similar to the stuff you hear going on in Africa and all that stuff, just to see how they have preserved little bits and pieces of that indigenous culture despite everything, and to see that worldwide with all of these oppressed cultures as well. It's inspiring, but man, like it just shows the importance of art because without art as a means to express ourselves, like what do we really have? Like we can bitch and talk about the problems all day long. That's been my issue with this community is there's a lot of people out there, I call them the talking heads of anarchy, and they're all like, yeah, and the government's bad and COVID's a scam and they're trying to get us all in real ID and they're trying to steal our money and they're trying to tax us and all this. And it's like, yeah, but what are you actually going to do about it? Like, how are you actually going to
Yeah.
change what's going on in the trajectory of this world? Like, how are we actually going to find a way to bring people together instead of just we got all these groups all over the place, like,
Yeah, and one of the things we see for in Europeans is that Europeans used to have those cultures as well. Like this thing that like, this kind of like joke that white people can't dance and white people don't have rhythm and white people don't have, and it's like, yeah, white people don't, but Irish people did, Italians did,
right.
Norwegians did, Scandinavians did. And the thing is like, you know, so many Europeans with the invention of the idea of whiteness, lost all of that. Like they had to give up their actual culture to the point where like yeah, and that's part of one of the things that's so, you know, that's so particularly insidious about this empire and this type of colonialism is that it's not based on virtue, it's based on solely constructed identity that you're either born into or you're not. Whereas there were empires before, and I know that anarchists would be opposed to all of those type of things, but they're not all the same. You know what I mean? We dislike all types of slavery, but the different types of slavery are different.
Right.
And different types of you know and particularly like this thing is really insidious, and it's meant that people that have been forced into the construct of whiteness have really also they've been the main people that have lost connection with the human element of all of this stuff, because it's like because the idea of whiteness is basically like humanity itself isn't very valuable, it's whiteness that's valuable, which is like, okay, well, what does whiteness mean really? You
Yeah.
start seeing that like it it's completely situational. Like it doesn't it has no independent meaning of
And
you
it's
know
funny you bring that up because I was raised in a trailer park in fucking Ohio. I was white trash, like I was that. But then I come to Mexico and just because of the color of my skin, I'm treated completely differently. In some ways I'm treated with more respect. The other ways, I have to pay higher prices just because I'm white. But like I get that to an extent, like
Mm,
we have a better ability to make more money. Even me and my, I don't make as much as my American high school, friends, right? But like, it's interesting to see and try and like mush that around in your head. I'm pretty Irish, like most of my genetics are Irish, and I've been kind of connecting to that. And yeah, there was that Celtic tribal, tap dancing, paganism aspect that's been more or less lost, and now it's considered
man, you talking
so
about one
weird.
of the dopest cultures in Europe that I've been aware of. And I think it's because they were oppressed. And
Hmm.
you know what I mean? And they weren't like Irish people were not like whiteness is like it's such a constructed thing that it expands and contracts, So like initially Irish and Italians weren't seen as white. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Greeks weren't seen as white. And so yeah, like the oppression that Irish people suffered for centuries, like that forced Irish people to have a real sense of like really locking in with that history and the music and what it means. So in a lot of ways, it's one of the only like European cultures that's still accessible, and it's dope. And I mean, and Irish people like man throughout history have been aligned with oppressed people always. Like it's just known. Like if you see a now Irish American is a little different
Hmm.
because then it's like okay at first it's like are you going to be included in whiteness or not, and then when Irish people were included they're like okay let's get busy enforcing racism so we can solidify our place in whiteness.
Yeah,
But in
that's
Ireland though
heartbreaking.
it's like man the most pro-Palestinian people on earth, the most pro-black power people on earth, the most you know what I mean, like they got murals of Angela Davis and Malcolm X and they got Palestine flags everywhere. It's no joke. Irish people are very special people.
And it's funny, like, I feel the same about Mexicans, like, there's pro-Palestine graffiti flags all over the place. They just had a protest, my friend was a part of it in Morelia about, Mexico essentially ignoring the whole Palestine issue. And it's like, I love this country just because one, that indigenous culture is still more or less intact, and two, it is the same place, the same way in that way. Like it doesn't matter, if you're a good person and if you treat people with respect, you're going to be treated with respect here, and you're going to be accepted into the culture, I'm like, I don't look Mexican at all, but there's a saying here where it's, yeah, eres mexicana, they say that to me in my classes and stuff. They'll be like Lily, which is, you might know my old name, but it's Lily or Mana. Yeah, it is Mexicana, which is Lily's sister, and you're Mexican now. And it's like, All you have to do is just be a fucking person. And I love that. And I think that any culture that really just kind of accepts that is beautiful. It's kind of disgusting, honestly, for me to see the way the United States is handling shit right now. It's like you do realize the entire country was founded by immigrants. Like, why are we pushing people out that built the country, that built the culture, that made the economy what it is? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah, America has really, really bad amnesia, and it's one of the biggest signs that that this form of power is not proud of itself. It knows to hide its tracks.
Hmm.
Whereas, I live in Istanbul. We're very proud of the religious Muslims in Turkey. There's religious Muslims and like Republican national secularists, and they're very nationalist. They're very, they're all about the Turkish Republic. And so it's interesting because, like, Amy Goodman would call the religious party the right wing conservative party, and they would call the secularists the left wing liberal party. And neither one of those are really that accurate. This is a different way of constructing things. But, people that have pride for the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Caliphate, they're very proud of the things that the Ottomans did. Because they're rooted in a sense of virtue. What now, whether you agree with it or not, or there are other people that aren't going to see it the same way. But the amnesia that modern white Western power has about the things that it does and how much it covers, it just like we don't want you to really know what we did. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
I mean,
it's
if they all knew, there would be revolution worldwide overnight. Like if people really knew, that's why they kind of rewrite the history and what they teach us in schools, a bastardized version of what's going on. I do want to
yeah.
ask you about Istanbul because that's a place I've always been fascinated with. One of my best friends, she's from Turkey. I can't travel. I don't know how much you know about my story, but I am in the beautiful open air prison that is Mexico. But one of the first places I intend on going once I get a passport and can travel is Turkey, is to Istanbul. So I want to know, what do you love about it and what do you hate about it? Because no place is perfect.
Yeah. Well, um I mean, I don't hate anything about it, but it can be really difficult to live here.
Mhm.
I would say one of the main things is the language because Turkish is a very different language from English and Arabic, which are the two languages that I know. Turks do not speak other languages, and nobody else in the world really speaks Turkish. So it's kind of, and so one of the things is that we're technically tourists. Actually, I just found out that our visas were changed from tourist to humanitarian. And I don't know who did that or what it means yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. But so every year we ask if we can stay another year, and they don't need a reason to say no. So we could have to leave at any time. Probably for me to learn Turkish would probably take me a full year. And if I spend a year learning Turkish instead of doing all the things that I do with my time, I could end up learning to a language that maybe we don't get renewed for another year. Maybe we have to leave, and then there's literally nothing you can do with that with the language. So that's one of the major challenges. um, Turks, I will say in general, they're very accepting of people who learn Turkish. So like you're saying, like being embraced as, some people would include you in being Mexican. It's like with Turkish, it's not that unless you really, really, really learn the language. They really feel honored by that, and they feel disrespected if you don't learn the language. So I just attribute any of the trouble that I have here to that. I'll say, Turkey is experiencing a financial crisis, which doesn't bring out the best in people, but as difficult as it is to live here, it's worth it because if this is Turks at their worst, they're beautiful people. I mean, there's first of all, like violent crime just isn't a reality. Like we live in one of the most densely populated cities on earth. My daughter goes for walks at 10 at night by herself. And my wife is from the Bronx. Like me and my wife both come from like inner city. Like we're very like streetwise people. And it's like, yeah, sure, go for a walk. You know what I mean? Yeah, go hang out with your friends at a cafe. Um, People are really very respectful of like the privacy and just like spatial autonomy of women. Um, you know, and then also just like me and my wife and my family being converts to Islam. There's something just so beautiful about a culture that, for as much as the secularists try to distance themselves from Islam, it's so deeply rooted in the culture. And, there's mosques everywhere and they all do the call for prayer 5 times a day. And it's a person actually doing it. And, the practice of Islam is really alive here. And it's also really affirming of beauty and culture and art and music and so like we wanted to live we're converts, so like we're still learning the religion basically. So it's hard to raise your kids like really strong in Islam if you don't have Muslim family and like you're new to it yourself. And but the cultures are so different. Like we would not live in Saudi Arabia, especially because it's me and 4 women. Like it's me and my wife and our daughter, so like we're not going to Saudi Arabia. There's certain places we wouldn't go, but Turkey is a place that like my 17-year-old is she comes from a religious family. She wears hijab. We pray. We go to, Islamic gatherings and stuff all the time. Um, and she's really into collecting records. For a while, she was really into skateboarding and photography and that's all that's like celebrated for religious Muslim girls to be out here just doing cool stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've also heard a lot of good things about the food. And my boyfriend, well, he's my fiance now, he's Mexican, and he spent some time, like, he spent a couple weeks there last year. And what he had to say is, he's like, well, these are the Mexicans of Europe. Like, so much of the food and the culture and the art is so similar, and also the hospitality. Like, I've heard it is very common for Turkish people to just invite you into their home and, feed you and share their culture in any way they can. And I think that's really special. Um, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned a bit about the language because he lived in Serbia for 4 years and he didn't end up learning the language because it's the same kind of thing, only like a certain number of people speak is one country. You leave that country, it's useless. At least for me, like I'm still learning Spanish. I understand everything, but I speak not great. I try though. But I at least have the incentive that there's an entire continent down below me that speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
There's all of Central America, like there's millions upon millions upon millions of people I could communicate with, but like I could imagine, and I've heard my friend, my close friend Felice, I've heard her speak Turkish, and I'm just like, damn, that is a mouthful. Like it is not. It's not similar. Like Spanish is, there are some words that are pretty similar to English, where you can kind of get the
Yeah.
idea of things. But
Yeah, Spanish is it's so close to English. Like
hmm
they're in the same family of languages and the things are constructed in very, very similar ways and things like that. And I mean Arabic is a lot closer to both those languages too.
mm.
A lot of Spanish used to be Arabic, and it still is. There's still like, 700 words or something that are still Arabic words, but they really tried to take the Arabic out of Spanish. They did their best, but they weren't able to do it.
Yeah, it's still deeply embedded. We are actually at a conversation. I forget the example that they used, but it was basically the same word, both in Spanish and in Arabic, because she speaks Arabic too, and it's really
Hundreds
interesting to
of
see that.
words.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that. On the faith thing, it's interesting because in my birth country, there's so much hate and misunderstanding of what it means to be Muslim, and I've actually learned a lot about the faith in general. I'm in general not a religious person, but I have respect for all of these different schools of things. But I've learned a lot about what it means to be Muslim, like using your heart for what hearts are for and things of that nature. And I just want to ask you, what do you wish more people understood on what it means to be a practicing Muslim? It's definitely not about just going and suicide bombing other people, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the idea that Islam is about terrorism is like that's a very specifically crafted narrative by people who have a very specific agenda. And if anything, what that shows is that the people in power in the West are very fearful of Islam. And so if somebody has that association, it's like, well, why was I given that association? Why has all this money and time and effort been put into, making us all associate Islam with senseless violence? And, so those are good questions. And I mean, I think one is that Islam is a thing that really beautifully brings together the spiritual, the intellectual, the cultural, the political, the economic. It brings it all together in a way that's cohesive, coherent, that's very, very rooted in justice and fairness and goodness. It also really takes into account uh, the human condition and like the proclivities that human beings have. So, I would say it's a beautiful blending and melding. And also it does not, for as much as people associate Islam with being Arab, only 20% of the world's Muslims are Arabs. Being a Muslim doesn't mean that a person has to change their culture. And it actually really affirms that all of the things that are virtuous about our culture, we should really feel good about those things and celebrate those things. So in China, there's a lot of Muslims in China, and it's not just the Uyghurs that are being persecuted, but there are ethnic Chinese Muslims from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Their Islam is very authentically Islamic, but it's also Chinese. And in, Eastern Europe, it's very Eastern European and it's also very Islamic. Um, in all parts of Africa, it's the same way. And there's a story that people are not covering now is that there are a lot of white Americans converting to Islam. It's not being done communally. So, it was something of a news story when communally Black Americans have been converting to Islam since the 1930s. There's, the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, this like idea of um, a Black communal understanding of Islam in America. That's something that was a story. And for white Americans converting, it's not as communal, um, but there are a lot of white Americans converting to Islam, and they're not changing their names or growing big beards, or they're not s- necessarily changing all the stuff that they do. But Islam is a really beautiful thing that brings together elements that if we only have a Western Christian or what they call now Judeo-Christian, which is a very strange concept. Um, from a Muslim perspective, uh, these ideas that we think can't be in harmony with each other, that Islam has no problem making harmony with. You know what I mean? So uh, Islam sees itself as a balance between communism and capitalism. It's something that predates both of those. The Muslims did not have this war between science and faith that the Catholic Church had, and that subsequent Christians had to figure out what degree are we on board with science. The Muslims actually are the people that developed modern science and laid a lot of the foundations for it. And so the idea of social justice being a deeply spiritual thing, the fact that in Sunni Islam in particular, which is the most mainstream Islam, the spiritual masters were never the same as the people in political power, and the religious leaders made it their business that either we correct the people in power or we have nothing to do with them. You know what I mean? But so many things that we just ultimately associate because we come up, like, we can say we're not religious, but we came from a culture that has hundreds of years of Catholic and Protestant European Christianity. So what's deeply embedded in us, when we hear the word God, we think of a man usually.
Mhm.
It's very difficult to dissociate that. And so one of the things that Islam does that makes it so feared by people in power in the West, I mean, first of all, just the economic justice in Islam, the like the sexual justice, the gender justice in Islam, the fact that Islam was always criticized by the other religions because it's not hateful of people that are in same-sex relationships. It's just the idea that, like, well, whenever we think of religion, whether we know it or not, we're thinking of like Western European Christianity. And you know, so there's so much that I would love for people to know. But the main thing that I would say is just maybe think about the fact that there's a billion people in this world that practice something that's practiced all over the world. Um, and the people that are in power are very afraid of it. So that makes it at least worth something to consider.
That's really interesting, the bit you mentioned about it being a bridge between capitalism and communism. Because I don't know how much you know about the Anarchapulco community, but in general, anarcho-capitalists was something I've noticed about the community. Because when I got into this movement, like I was raised by, tax evading dad who was working under the table my whole life and refusing to vote, and then my mom who's a drug dealer, so like I was raised pretty anarchist, and then I started to find that in college and I started pursuing everything. I looked into anarcho-communism, I looked into communism, I looked into socialism, I looked into capitalism, I looked into agorism, which is kind of where I settled. I looked into all of it. But one thing I've noticed, most of the people, and people watching this might get a little annoyed with me, but most of the people in this Anarchapulco community have never actually looked at what the communists have to say. And so they just say communism is a cancer, it's, a scourge upon the earth, whatever. But the reality is, like, the truth is somewhere kind of in the middle with all of these things. And in my ideal world, like if government were to poof disappear tomorrow, which I think 99% of people are not ready for that. They are not ready to be completely self-responsible. But if it did, my ideal world wouldn't simply be an anarcho-capitalist world because it's not going to happen. My ideal world is I'm going to have this area in this space and we're anarcho-capitalists. We have property rights. We respect each other's property. We have our own things and we trade at the markets, right? And over there, a couple miles away, you're probably going to have a commune, of people growing food together, eating together, working together, but not really keeping account of shit. And I think there's room for both. And it's interesting to hear that like Islam, the Muslim world is kind of like a bridge between those. And it makes sense to me, intrinsically, because I think this world in general is just too black and white on all of these things, like it's one way or it's the other. And if you're not one of these two camps, you're wrong, or you just don't have enough, intelligence to be able to make a choice or to discern a difference. And I think that's beautiful. I'm kind of in
Yeah,
the
I mean,
middle on all this stuff, including religion. I'm like, I respect it. I was raised by pagan parents, and my mom tried to go Christian at some point, which that was weird. But like, I wasn't raised with that hard, other than being raised in America, right? But like, I wasn't, I tried everything. I've I've gone to mosques, I tried the Mormon faith. I tried Jehovah's Witness. I tried Baptist and Protestant and Catholic. I went to all those places and I was like, all these people are saying the same thing with different faces.
mm.
That was my determination.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, the truth about like when there was an Islamic caliphate, there's both an understanding that there are going to be people that are going to excel financially, but they're not allowed to excel without genuinely taking care of the people that don't excel. So I mean, in when Islam was really thriving, you did have people that were extremely wealthy, but I mean the needs, and not just like, soup kitchens and homeless shelters, but I mean, it was really seen as both a necessity in society, but also a virtue that people like really took a lot of pride. Like, you see people now like, um, taking a lot of pride in being wealthy and the things that they can do and the things they can throw around. But like in the caliphate, there was a big, like, the honor of your family was based on how generous you were. And so you would find people, competing with each other. Like that was one of the ways that someone being affluent was respected, is because they were the most generous. And so I mean, you find like people setting up all of these like endowments for, I mean, for animals and for, I mean, Islam is the first system to establish rights for the environment, rights for animals. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the first one to say, that, like, to say publicly, not the first person to say it, but in terms of the public record, that there's no superiority of white over black or black over white or Arab over non-Arab, or, and also that women have the right to own property, that women aren't property, that women have, the first person in history to be recorded to like say these things. And so it's just
That's
something that people should at the very least, like, I think people owe it to themselves to seek awareness and to learn Islam from respected Muslim sources, not from Orientalists that are looking at Islam as outsiders. But like, go look at the sources and talk to qualified Muslims, and and learn it, and learn about it.
that's really interesting that you mentioned generosity and helping people as, a basis of it. Because, it's funny, and communists are, hardcore communists are guilty of the same thing, and hardcore anarcho-capitalists are, in that, like, one side is worse than the other. Most communists would not expect anarcho-capitalists to be generous giving people. But me in particular, my entire story is one that's based on that. Like, I would not be here looking healthy, living the lifestyle I did, if I didn't have people that were generous. When my ex was murdered, in front of me in Acapulco, what kept me going was dozens of people donated money to help me try to stay safe, like, and dozens of people even before that, when I moved to Mexico and we started telling our stories like, hey, we're refugees from the United States. We don't even have bank accounts. I don't even have a driver's license, right? All of that stuff, like, without the generosity of the people in the Anarchapulco community, and I say this many times, I would have killed myself, because I thought about it. When you are wanted by the Mexican government because you're witness to a murder, your abusive ex-partner was just murdered in front of you, you've got no money, you've got nothing, but you've got people that are like, hey, I'm here for you, how can I help? I've been seeing, and this was total accident. One of my biggest benefactors, I call him my cosmic dad, is here in town with me. And like, I don't think he realizes how much his help over the years, because he was helping me from day one, like how important that is, and how you can really, so many people are like, every year at Anarchapulco, they're like, wow, you look so much better. You look so healthy. You look so good. Like, how did you do it? And it's like, the reality is it's all of you guys. Like, it's the ability to live in a culture like Mexico where life isn't so expensive, and I had time to just decompress and get therapy and deal with my shit. It is the ability to do art for, my life. Like, I do circus stuff. I'm an aerial artist. I perform here in Mexico. It's music like yours. Like, I mean, all of that combined together, like that kept me from just fucking offing myself, right? And so I think that's beautiful and I think it's really cool. I've heard you, I listen to Traveler's podcast, which that's a, plug for Ali if you want to hear more from him, listen to that podcast. But one of you make these personalized advertisements for, companies you like. And one of them, I forget the name of the company, but it's basically a Muslim-based charity. And
Yeah,
I think that's beautiful and I think it's necessary. I think it's one of the biggest, most important parts of our society. We don't necessarily need governments to do that, It's better when private people do it.
yeah, Zakat Foundation. Yeah,
Hmm.
they're really cool, and there's times where they have to operate, like a big thing, but in terms of the way that they look at things, like one of the things that really drew me to them was that when they seek to help in a place, they try whenever possible and as much as possible to have it be led by locals. So that they don't just come in and help in ways that actually harm more. And yeah, I mean, it's like, man, it's one of the things we always talk about is that, you know, I've done all sorts of organizing and activism, and I mean, all this, but um, you know, been harassed while traveling, and my daughter and I were actually deported from this country, and have, deeply, deeply harassed and searched, and all that kind of stuff. The FBI came to my house on my birthday and scared my daughters, and all this kind of stuff. And so as I believe in activism, I believe in organizing, I believe in, whatever ideology brings people together, and to try to do something good about the state of the world. And so, like, yeah, we want to change the world, and sometimes we get really down, like, I can't change the world, but it's like we can have an impact on our own inner world, and we can change somebody's world.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, those people didn't change the whole world. Like, the world is still the world. But like you said, like, they saved your life.
right.
You know what I
And
mean? And to save one person, to help one person, eat, take a shower, have somewhere to sleep, feel loved and cared for and acknowledged by the human family on some kind of level. It's like, to downplay that means that this whole thing is just about my ego.
right,
Like, if I can't be Che Guevara, I don't want it. You know what I mean? Or like, if I can't be put in whatever name. Like, if
right.
I can't be this famous, like, historical figure that changes everything forever, I don't want to do it. And it's like, well, then that's about your ego. That's not about actually contributing.
And you never really know where the ripples are going to go because, like,
Yeah.
I took a huge risk telling my story as a, I got charges in the United States, and I told my story not just, it started blogging, but, there's a documentary series. Most people watching this know me through that documentary series. And I did it, and everybody's like, oh, would you get paid? I got paid absolutely nothing through that. But what I did get out of it was two things. One, just through my involvement in this community, I have family. I have family worldwide. Um, Another thing that I got out of it is even still, it's been 2 years since that series got released, 3 years actually since it got released. And I still have people that message me on a monthly basis that tell me that they didn't kill themselves because they saw my story and said, well, that girl can go through all of that and then be happy. Then they find me on social media and they see me flying on the trapeze and they see all the stuff that I do. I'm doing a comic book with my friend telling my story. They see all these things and they're like, well, she can do that. I can at least continue to wake up. And that really does have a gigantic ripple effect, like that really
Absolutely.
and that was, getting back to your course, that was the part that spoke to me about it most, and that's the part that speaks to me about your music the most is you're known for this autobiographical rap style. You are putting all sorts of stories. I feel like I've gotten to know you, your wife, your children, like all of that through your songs, for better or for worse. You do talk about the consequences a little bit in the thing, but like I think that is truly special is you need to be able to tell these stories because, it's going to touch somebody else and it is going to have that huge ripple effect. I do have a question related to that. What I want to know is what is the most surprising or unexpected part of you having dedicated your life to this craft that is hip hop, rap, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just realizing, you know, like I'm sure everybody that anybody that does any kind of public thing over their life or like communal thing will say probably the same thing. Like you realize how much we really have in common and how much I have in common deeply with people that at one time I felt othered. I felt like we were others from one another, you know what I mean? That's like, oh, okay, no, we actually the deepest parts of who we are so are mirrors for each other.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Um, Segueing from that, I have two other questions. Well, I have more questions, but one question I have, and I asked you this during a Blood on Beats course, but um, I want to ask you this here is basically during that course, you told me I asked you the question like, what advice do you have for getting started doing this, as somebody who has never gotten started. And I remember you told me the outcome is none of your business. Can you explain a little bit of what that means? That's something I want to share with this community.
Yeah, well, that, I mean, for me, that's going to come through the lens of being a Muslim who believes in the divine, like that that what we have is our intention, our will, and then we bring to it whatever we are. So we have ourselves, our intention, our will, our effort, and our honor of the process. you know so Muslims pray 5 times a day. The way that we actually say it is like I offered my morning prayer. Like I offered my, it's called salat, so it's like I offered my morning prayer. I offered my, you know and the idea is to honor the process and to show up and to submit to the process. We talk in the course a lot about having a practice that we honor. So it's like, the outcomes a lot of times are related to our ego, and to be focused on outcomes is a lot of times to be insincere, and it means that we're not going to be as truthful because we're trying to craft what we do based on what we think the outcome is. And one of the things I find is that most creative people, even if they don't have a religious or spiritual framing that they put it in, the reality seems to be the understanding is pretty universal. They're like, I don't know what's going to come of this. I don't get to really even choose the songs that come out of me. I certainly don't, none of us get to choose who they resonate with or how many people they resonate with or why they resonate. And that's kind of so when I was saying that, like, you end up feeling extremely connected to people that were really surprising. So when I was a kid, my parents are white, but I'm albino. Um, albinism is a thing that my own experience felt like as a little kid in white communities in the white world. I just felt like I wasn't really a valid person. Black people have a higher degree of albinism, and also it's really noticeable. And so for Black people, albinism is really it's really a normal thing. And Black people just have this feeling, my experience is, of like looking out for albinos and also a lot of people, white and Black, just think that albinos are Black. And so I was, I had this whole experience from the time I was a little kid where like I didn't have any community until I was just found myself being part of this Black community. And then almost immediately I was furious with how amazing they are as feeling like an insider versus what, even my white family who thought that they were very liberal and stuff, they saw themselves as very liberal and certainly didn't see themselves as racist. But I just saw the difference between what my family and what my country said about them, thought about them, expected of them. I was furious about that from the time I was little. And so I discovered hip hop from actually being in that community. A lot of people, I think get into black music or culture or something like that, and then they discover like, oh, there's a lot more to these people than what we've been led to believe. For me, it was the opposite. For me, it was like, okay, I was part of having some sort of participation in the community, and then when I discovered the music, it's like, okay, finally everybody's going to hear what I see. Finally, everybody's going to have a chance to hear what I'm hearing. Um, and so when I came up rapping in the '80s, when I was a little kid, everybody in that space was black, with very few exceptions. If there were white people there, it was like the one white person that for whatever reason all her friends were black. You know what I mean? Those were the only white people around. And so then I started touring and making music, touring, and all the people that were my heroes accepted me and they took me on tour. Public Enemy and Rakim and Big Daddy Kane and Wu Tang Clan and all these people that I like love embraced me, treated me like a peer and an equal, and brought me on tour and all this stuff. And I was touring in that world, but then that was around the time that this underground independent hip hop scene developed with a bunch of white artists and a bunch of white listeners. That didn't exist when I was dedicating my life to hip hop. That didn't exist. There was no white lane and audience for rap music. There just didn't exist. It was only the black audience for the most part. Um, and so when that thing emerged, it's like I would do half of my touring with Public Enemy and then half my touring with Atmosphere. When I toured with Public Enemy, it felt really comfortable, but I had to earn it every day. But this white audience was just like, no, you're our guy. You're what we've always been waiting for. And the excitement and just the support was so overwhelming. And that was really weird to me because I felt ostracized by white people. And I'm sure I oversimplified it and generalized it because I was 7 years old when all that happened. But I felt triggered and traumatized by white people. I didn't trust white people. Um, you know, and then I go into this like very black art form and end up with all these white fans that are like, we love you and your music is speaking to us and da 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 da. And it's taken me a lot. But then then there's all these questions that come along with that. Like, okay, do I believe them? Do I trust what they're saying? You know? And it's like, well, what I'm putting into this music is true. I'm true and I'm sincere in what I'm saying. And so it makes me think that they must be sincere in their response to it. So it's been 20 something years now of that. So I've lived with that reality for 20 years now. And now it's like, okay, full embrace. Like you know, now I really do believe that.
I'm
But,
glad that you do, because as one of those white fans, like what really got me is, I mean, I like I said, I've always been fascinated with African culture, all of that, right? But what really got me is when I started getting into anarchy, I was honestly pissed at the state of the world. And then on Pandora, I hear Uncle Sam Goddamn come on, and I was like, who is this guy? And like, Ant's beats and your voice and the content. And then I start listening to more of your stuff, and it's about the story. It's about that human, that human element. Like one of my favorite songs of yours is one of your most brutal, I've heard you say, is Walking Away. But like you, the world needs more, like you say in the Truth Is song, the world needs more of that truthful music. There's not a lot of honesty out there at this point. And I think, at least for me, that's what really, really resonated was, my favorite band growing up in high school was a band called Coheed and Cambria. And the reason that I liked them is because they were telling this autobiographical story in the concept of like this intergalactic space rock comic series, right? And I was like, damn, we need more people telling stories. And then I hear you and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is my shit, this is what I've been looking for basically my whole life, like my mom was really into rap when I was a kid. I had exposure to that world, so I was able to quickly tune in because I know a lot of people listen to rap and they can't follow along with the words, they don't feel the meat of it. Whereas like I've always been able to feel that. And I think I think that's really special. And I'm glad you mentioned you being albino because that was one of the things I wanted to talk about is specifically also your sight issues. One of my favorite songs is Us. And there's that line in it where you say, I'm blind in my eyes, so I see you with my heart. To me, all y'all look exactly the same. Fear, faith, compassion, and pain. It's just like, how can people be the same after truly listening to shit like that, you know? And that is why you have that following, there is something deeply tribal to the beats combined with, the tempo of the words and everything like that. And then the story, it's so relatable, even though it's so not, because most of us, like, we have our sight intact, you know? I'm not allergic to the sun like you are, even though I do burn like a motherfucker in Mexico. But I want to know, like, how does being albino, how does your vision problem, like how does that affect how you interact with the world? And I know you don't really know any different, right? But I want to know, beyond what I've kind of assumed to listening to your music.
Yeah, I mean, I just really see it as a gift. It's difficult, but I see it as a gift because, both in the sense that, yeah, there's the physical, just kind of disability part of it. Like, yeah, I'm legally blind. I don't have depth perception. My vision is just very, very low, hypersensitive to light, to where, if it's anything other than like really, really low light, like I'm squinting, it's kind of like if a cop shines a light in your face. I know we've both had that experience, but, and you're blinded by it. Like that's what most light, normal light feels like that to me. Um, and then, yeah, also like not being able to be exposed to the sun and things like that. So always having to think about that with going outside or even sitting by windows or whatever, just those kind of things. And then a lot of times albinos, there's a whole psychological aspect of it too, where like we just don't feel like valid people. And so it's interesting, there's really high depression, suicide, obesity, addiction. Those are all like really very common. But also you find a really high artistic sense too. You know what I mean? That like albinos have. But then the thing to me that like I think that all that is a gift, but especially this for me, the social part of just knowing what it feels like to before you get to say anything to anybody and explain anything, like you're just different from the second you walk into a room. And so now I'm in my late 40s. And so maybe people just now people think I'm in my 50s or 60s because my hair is white. So they're just like, I need to know your skincare regimen. And it's like, oh, I'm actually 20 years younger than you think I am. And I'm Muslim, so I've never drank or smoked. You know what I mean? Um, but so now like the older you get, the easier that gets because it's not weird to have white hair. But when you're 7 years old, you have white hair and thick glasses and you can't see and you bump into stuff and all this kind of stuff. I mean, people are, the second you walk in a room, everything stops and like everybody's noticing you. And they're either helping you or they're very cruel or they're just not acknowledging you or they don't know what to say or whatever. So I see that as a gift. And I didn't fully realize it until the things that I learned along the way started speaking to the people that were being cruel to me
Hmm.
and actually making them feel like thank you for this is what you're saying, like it's so amazing what you're saying. It's like, man, yeah, this really just it highlights something about the human condition that is so universal to me. So feeling like you're not at home anywhere also makes you at home everywhere, and you're especially at home with people who feel like they're not at home. And you start realizing nobody feels completely at home. The
Yeah.
most beautiful people in the world think that they have hangups about their looks. You know what I mean? Wealthy people are not happier. Anybody that, The people in the dominant groups, like, man, everybody feels ostracized. Nobody really feels, except for people that are genuinely doing community. And
Yeah,
so a lot of
yeah,
times
that's
these
beautiful.
ideologies to me are like, and that even gets to the idea of these different ideologies. On some kind of level, I'm able to see like, okay, so whether you're talking about a specific strain of anarchism or or if it's a religious thing or if it's like these are all attempts to have community based on something good and based on some common good, so I respect it all.
It's interesting you mentioned the whole like wealthy people are not healthy because I or happy because I've had this conversation with my partner and he's like, "Oh, if you drop $1 million on somebody who's depressed, they're not going to be depressed anymore." And I'm like, I don't agree with
Not
that.
true.
Because the reality is, what makes people happy is having a sense of purpose, and money doesn't buy that. You can still, I've met so many people who have met me and they're like, man, you're so lucky. They have way more money than me. They could be a millionaire. And they're like, you're so lucky because you know who you are and you know what you want to do with your life. And it took me a long time to reconcile that because I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, be for real right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know a lot of people that are much more famous than me. I know all the rappers that I want to know, like everybody that I respect and look up to and admire. And a lot of them are more famous than me, and almost all of them are more rich than me. But all of them, they either like respect me or look up to me or that I make them uncomfortable. And it's what you're saying. It's like a having a sense of like security and yeah, that sense of purpose that like, you
and
know.
and on that note, I invite anybody who's listening to this to pause this and go listen to the song "Picket Fence." I want to read a bit from it because that it's totally in alignment with what you're talking about. It's you look the way you do because you're special, not the short bus way. I mean that God's going to test you, and all this pain is training from the day when you will lead with the gift God gave to you. And it's like, what the fuck? You know, I just have to say thank you.
Mm, I appreciate that so much. Yeah, that's a real person that said that to me. Back to what we were saying about how we touch each other in ways that we might not even realize. That was a woman that I've talked about kind of throughout my like time writing songs and talking about them. But when I was in first or second grade, there was a black woman that worked at the lunch in the lunch area at my school, and in a lot of ways, like she spelled out the way that I see my life to this day. And I don't know her name. I don't remember what her name was. I was only in that school for a year. I don't know if she remembers me. I don't know if she's alive. I don't know if she knows like, yeah, there's this guy doing this underground rap thing, and I used to know him when he was little. I have no clue, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, I'm out here with these kids and this music, and I'm out here literally doing what you know, literally making my own way in the world. And it really was like her and other women like her. She's kind of like an amalgamation of like all these like a number of women throughout my life. But
Yeah,
there's a woman that,
we get
yeah.
these guardian angels that kind of come in and they just drop whatever it is, on us. And these are the people that really shape who we are. I've got a list of guardian angels. Like I wrote a blog about this on Father's Day, but I collect dads. I got like 7 dads because I got my birth dad, who's a saint. He's one of the best people you'll ever know. But he taught me the value of the dad. And then I started collecting all these other dads. I got my Mexican dad, I got my cosmic dad, I have my Bambuda dad, I have my crypto dad. I have all these dads. But all these people have also been these guardian angels who have really shaped who we are. And also I have, it's interesting you mentioned that lady at school when I was in high school. the only reason I made it through high school is because I befriended the librarian and she took care of me, you know. She fed me, she fought for me, she told me what a healthy relationship is supposed to be like. She told me about her marriage, and that's kind of how I based the relationship I'm in now. She told me how to fight for what I'm, you know, worth, how to she had this sign in the library that said well-behaved women rarely make history. Um, I kind of took that a little too seriously, but like, you know, it's beautiful how we get these little bits and pieces from all these people to make up the fabric of who we are, you know? Like, I consider you part of that. Like, I was telling my boyfriend today because he loves Robert Greene. He loves all of his work. And I was like, man, I'm so nervous and I'm so excited. And he's like, oh, it's, you know, it's just Brother Ali. And I was like, imagine you're having a conversation with Robert Greene, okay? Do you get it? And he's like, I get it. I get it, you know? So I just have to say thank you so much. One for the, you know, I told him I was like, I'm gonna cry today. But the music, the words, the just fucking cojones to really put yourself out there in the way that you have, like you have changed so many people's lives for the better, you know, and I just wish I just wish more people would listen to the words because there were so many things like, you know, own light, like that I could list pretty much all of your songs and find some sort of life message. You know, it's not about the shallow shit that people are on. It's really about just trying to be the best version of yourself, trying to love yourself, you know, like I don't know, I don't think you know this, but I rapped along to Forrest Whitaker at 3 in the morning at Mexican karaoke after being like begged by my classmates in circus, and they all just kind of sat there like, uh, what? You know, and I was just in it, you know, I was there for it because it's stuff like that that really it's what we need. And that's a big part of like I programmed and came up with the idea for this whole virtual event, NonConformist Series, you know, that's the whole reason we're doing this because you're going to be speaking and the expressions of freedom because man, without all of these different ways to express ourselves, like there's really no point in living this life. Like all of our other events have been like, oh, health and spirituality, cryptocurrency, homesteading, practical ways of freedom. Well, like I think in many ways the most practical way to be free in this world is, you know, through art, inspiring other people to do their art, whatever that is. You know, like I didn't necessarily, I don't know what I expected taking blood on beats, right? I just wanted to get to know you. I wanted to see if it was something I could do. And what I got out of it was a greater respect for the craft, um, greater understanding of myself, greater understanding of what went in, because I realized a big part of, you know, why I love Atmosphere is actually Ant and his beats. Like that man. And listening to your interviews with him, those are incredible. Those are some of my favorite podcasts I've ever listened to in my whole life. All of these things, you know, it's just, I got that. And what I really walked away from was you have to tell the story. Whatever that looks like for you, if you have a story to tell, you need to make sure it's told because you never have any idea who it's going to really help and whose world it's going to change, you know? It's
Mm.
that's the way that I see. And I had mentioned previously that, you know, I got inspired by Coheed and Cambria and his comic book series. I also love Stephen King and the Dark Tower series, and there's a comic book about that. I really love multimedia art. Have you ever considered doing some sort of visual or, you know, written art combined with what you do with your music? Or is it just music for you? I know you mentioned in the course that you considered starting a coffee shop, which I fully support. But what would you ever do anything complementary but different?
I've thought about it. I have a friend who's really encouraging me to DJ and like DJ with visual with like visuals.
Hmm.
So basically like playing music that's inspired me and like making visual things that go along with it. And then, telling stories and, maybe even weave some of my own songs in there and things like that. So I've thought about it, but yeah, it feels like it would be a really deep undertaking. Like it would really require a lot of time and I think if I get to the place where I'm like, oh man, I'm scared of that, that'll be the thing that'll make me want to do it.
Yeah, I hear you. I recently started, and I'll have a presentation in the event that we're doing together about this myself. I recently, with the help of my friend Uli, started doing a comic book series because I've had so many people tell me. I mean, I've gotten into police chases, all sorts of shit in Mexico, and so many people tell me like your life is like a comic book. Why don't you do a comic? And I'm like, well, that's actually my dream, but not right now. And I told Uli about that. He's a graphic artist. And I was like, man, I got the story, it's just I don't have the time. And I knew I told him like I know I want to have you do the art eventually, but I'm not going to ask you to do that until I can pay you for it, right? I'm gonna publish a book about all this. I'm gonna use that money to pay you. And finally, last fall, he was like, I'm not interested in waiting. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this in whatever small ways that we can. And I was like, who's gonna even care about this?
Mm.
And we got a small little fan base going. We got a few issues, but like, there is something so cathartic, and I know you know this from your own autobiographical aspect to your art of just when you tell your story, you just put all the emotions into it, however it comes out, right? And then you look at it later and you go, damn, that's kind of harsh. Like I've been kind of harsh on my ex who passed away. We were in the process of breaking up when he died, but like, because he was very abusive. And then I'm like, but do I really want that victim narrative to be who I am? And so
Mm.
telling that story, I have to ask myself, how do I really want to share this story? How do I want to share my heart with the world? And yeah, I think you definitely, more than most people, know exactly what that is about. Also, how do you tell stories when there are people that are living either mourning the person in the story or it's this person themselves? Like, how do you tell your truth without hurting other people, That's kind of my last question is like, how do you find that balance? I know you use some specific examples. One of my favorite songs, Fresh Air, is kind of has one of those moments in it where you hear it as the person listening and you're like, hell yeah, but like the
Yeah.
people you're talking about in that, your mother-in-law, like, damn, okay, yeah, that would kind of suck being kind of called out like that. How do you do that?
I mean, so yeah, I've done it by making mistakes, Yeah, yeah, like it's like you don't it's very hard and like I don't know if there's a way to do it without hurting anyone.
Yeah,
I just like I don't know if there's a way to do that. Um so yeah, like the example that you gave, there's a song that I have up where I'm celebrating all this great stuff that's happening in my life, and I mentioned that my mother-in-law at the time, my first wife's mom, that she had been off drugs for X number of years. And when I first met her, when I first married my wife, she was still on drugs. And I thought everybody knew that. I'm like, how could anybody have been in your life and not known that? You know what I mean?
right.
And there's a bunch of stuff I didn't say. I didn't say how she paid for those drugs. You know what I mean? I didn't say, there's a lot I never said. I was just celebrating the fact that she got clean and sober, but I mentioned the drug and that was a problem, like the specific drug, which that carried like a really negative connotation. And so she came to me. I thought she was going to feel celebrated, and she did, but she was like, you know, I didn't expect for. She was like, part of why I got sober is because you guys had your son, and she's like, I didn't expect him to know that. I thought if I got sober, he didn't necessarily, or that could maybe be something I could tell him about. But now that because it's in the song, it's just there forever, you know. So, and then there's stuff that in the moment, like the walking away song about my first divorce, I thought that that was a very fair, it's like that's just from my perspective, you know. And at the time, like what I was comparing to, like that's when Eminem was, the music about your ex was not, it was like, yeah, kill her and throw her off a cliff and put her, you know. So I was just like, but I said some things in that song, and that wicked, talking about her heart and that wicked hard boiled fist. It's just like, man, it's some like very harsh things
But
that are,
it's those songs that like really hit. Like Walking Away is one of my favorite songs because, I've been in my own version of that position. There is that point, it some you said something about not the kind of man to draw a line in the sand. Something about like when that happens, it's over. You got to walk
if you got
away.
to draw it all, then it's time for you to scram. It's like, yeah,
Exactly,
no
exactly. And it's just like,
ultimatums.
damn, like I think
You
it
know what's
was
funny,
necessary.
Miranda? So it's funny because I left the Rhyme Sayers record label,
Hmm.
and at that time there was someone else who also wanted to leave the label, and they they were like, if I'm gonna stay here, it's gotta change. It's gotta be like this, and it's gotta be like this, and it's gotta be like this. You know, I got the main people together. Ant was one of them, and I said, you know, this was a beautiful thing, da 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 da, you know, all these things. And I said, but you know, I've reached the point where it is completely clear to me that I need to go forward on my own, not within this organization. And so, thank you for everything. And from now on, I'm leaving basically. And Ant was like, man, he said, yeah, this other guy tried to. He was like, you actually sat the kids down and said, I'm divorcing your mom. He was like, he tried to move into the basement, and that guy is still there. You know what I mean? It's
That's
funny,
crazy.
but he was talking about walking away. He was like, man, he's like, I'm just like when you divorce your first wife, man, like no threats, no ultimatums, no. It's like, you know,
It's a
I
beautiful lesson though. Like if I had followed my that lesson, like if I'd found walking away 8 years earlier, I probably wouldn't be a fugitive living in Mexico. However, I do know that like at this point my life is beautiful. The one really truly big thing I got out of that series was the love of my life, Mexican over in Serbia, watched the series and said, I'm gonna go back to Mexico and I'm gonna get that woman, and
wow.
he is one of the biggest angels because he is just, I'm on an adventure trying to fix my situation in Mexico, and I would not be able to do it without his emotional support, his financial support, just him taking me out on adventures, like all of it. And it's like sometimes you just gotta make the mistakes to be able to actually learn, to be able to move forward. And I think
Yeah.
that you're an excellent example of, the highs and the lows of that. And yeah, it's been truly incredible to like, people look at me weird because they're like, oh, they ask in Mexico all the time when you meet somebody new. Okay, what do you listen to? And I'm like, oh, this guy named Brother Ali, and they're like, okay, what else do you listen to? And I'm like, right now, maybe a little atmosphere, and that's it. Like, because I'm hyper focused on that message, and I'm always kind of decoding various bits and pieces about it. Every time I think I've like felt all of the things in regards to your music, I'll be driving down the road listening to Us, just like, it's that's just, oh man, it's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. It's been such a pleasure to find your music. Thank you for just doing the work and really putting something beautiful out there and showing your heart to the whole world because I think the world just needs so much more of that.
I appreciate that so much. And, you know, you have a good opinion of what I've done and of me because of the fact that you see something that's also in you.
Hmm.
Like we're part of the same, we're on the same team, we're part of the same struggle. You know, like I look at what I do know about your life, and, you know, you're in the situation you're in and you've made the sacrifices that you have because you've tried to seek out and contribute to something good that's meaningful for you and for the world, you know? And so it resonates because we're the same.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
like we're mirrors for each other. Otherwise, it wouldn't resonate. And so, I see what you're doing. I'm like, wow, that's pretty gangster. That's pretty G. Like it's like, man, I respect the level of sacrifice, commitment, and just realness. Like, this is not just a Twitter account you run. Like, this is something that you have lived and have risked it all for and given it all to. And so I feel, there's something very deeply validating for me, um, just in knowing that, like, man, if you're out there trying to figure out how to do something about yourself and the world in whatever way you can, and going through this crazy roller coaster to do it, it's like, were I to have heard, like, seen that documentary first, I'd be like, oh yeah, like, she's doing it, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you know what I mean? Oh, that's crazy, you know what I mean? And but we met first through the Blood on Beast thing, and then I found out about. But if I had seen that first, and then somebody was like, that person like listens to your music, right? Because that happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That does
yeah, yeah.
happen. Where like I'll find out that like George Floyd's fiance is like one of the biggest Brother Ali fans, um, and it's like, oh man, there's just something really deeply validating about that for me, and it's because
Yeah.
we're reflections of each other.
No, that's absolutely true. Because, yeah, and on that note, like I mentioned, if the government were to disappear, most people wouldn't know how to do it, like how to handle themselves. Well, I've existed as close as you can to stateless for the last 10 years. This is my 10th anniversary last month of living on the run like this outside of the system. And it's not for the faint of heart. And most people are like, oh, well, that's going to make you not have compassion for people. But for me, it's the opposite. I've
Yeah.
realized like I used to have people message me like, how do I do what you did? I got charges. And I used to write a guidebook, like go to Tijuana on a Friday night, like all the same stuff that was told to me. But now I just tell them like, man, don't. Like I regularly break down because of the way, I wake up every morning and I'm like, I can't believe I'm still in Mexico, still without papers, still in this situation after 10 years. Like most people just don't have it and they don't have to do it. So like it's allowed me to raise my respect for people. Like I don't hate on people that pay their taxes and go the normal way. It's not for me, but I don't hate on it because man, life is hard enough. Why are we got to make it
Man.
harder, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah,
it,
people are like, "Thank you for speaking about Palestine." Most of these rappers don't do it, and it's like, yeah, because they're trying to live their life. They're living their dream, and they don't want to throw it away.
right. It's dangerous to really live these ideas, Like
Yeah.
I really went like I jumped off a cliff face first into the anarchy world and then got smacked by the government. And it's like it's really hard to do this. It is
Yeah.
so damn hard to do it, but I wouldn't change anything about it because at the end of the day, I have very few like, what if I had done that in my head?
Mhm.
Like I have very few of those because the life that I have is just so beautiful, It's just like, holy shit. And yeah, you're right. We're mirrors of each other. The people that we resonate with are because we see that little morsel that makes us get up in the morning and keep going. It's the same thing. And that's why I keep doing what I do for Anarchapulco, like I've been involved with this movement since it started, and it's like lives have been lost, like money's been lost. So much has happened. It's a lot of work. People look at our ticket prices and they're like, you're rolling in cash and we're breaking even or losing money, but it's like, it's the only reason we haven't gotten you into Acapulco yet is because, well, you got to pay the bills too, and you got to it's expensive to bring you from Istanbul, it's all of that. But I do it because I mean, somebody's got to really just be the example. And that's what I've tried to do. And I know that's what you've tried to do. And that is why, you are as important. And they say never meet your heroes because you're going to be disappointed. And I put this in the email that I'm going to send out today about you and your involvement. And I was like, well, those people have clearly never met Brother Ali, and I totally deeply on a soul level understand why most people know you as Brother Ali because you have such big brother vibes, and I think
Mm,
that's beautiful. So
that's
thank
the
you.
goal.
Yeah, thank you
That's
for
the
being my
goal.
brother and everybody else's that finds you.
Well, I respect what you're doing. I appreciate it. I'm glad we're in this thing together.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to take up too much more time of your day. I think looking at my list, the only other question I have, and I think it'll be quick, is in Uncle Uzi Taught Me that song, you talk about basically performing Uncle Sam, goddamn, I think in Iraq, if I remember correctly.
Iran.
Yeah, in Iran and dealing with the issues of that and like getting marked as a 4S. Like, do you still face travel restrictions to this day from that? I know the FBI came to your house over. Like, do you still have that affecting you?
Yeah, it goes in and out. So there are times when I do, and then like I'll go 3 months where with nobody bothering me when I travel, and then I'll go 6 months where I can't fly from Minneapolis to Chicago on a 1 hour flight without, being searched and harassed and, on the airplane and just hours and hours of stupid questions and, you know, just like really, threatening stuff. And lately, my 17-year-old daughter has been getting 4S when she travels,
Wow.
which, it's like, yeah, so yeah, I still have trouble with that. If people want to check that song out, I was kind of, I didn't go there with the intention of performing on television. Um, and I was kind of, the people that invited me weren't completely forthcoming with what their plans were. I was kind of used, for a plan that they had that they didn't share with me. And so yeah, it was crazy. That was like one of those experiences of like, and then I'm in Iran and I converted to Islam and I'm there with, people I know and stuff, and we're there talking about like America's treatment of black people, and so I know I'm there doing some kind of revolutionary, edgy stuff that that's what I signed up for. But then, when you're there, it's like there's people that will say like "Death to America," and it was the first time that I felt defensive of America. Where I just was like, you got to be more specific than that. You know what I mean? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah,
Like, do you
I like
mean
that line where you like, it feels like somebody's talking about my mama here. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, I could feel that. Yeah.
yeah? It was a weird feeling. You know what I mean? Um, And then, yeah, like struggling to get out and feeling like I felt unsafe when I was there because it's like, yeah, these people are using me to try to make a point within their own country, but they're putting me in at risk. So
Yeah.
I don't trust these people. These people don't care about my well-being. You know what I mean? And so it was really hard getting out of the country. Um, you know, just so many different people with so many different agendas and like really serious stuff. And I definitely thought a lot about, I've been around Malcolm X's daughters, and I know a lot of great people that have died early or been martyrs or something. Even my great like musician friends that die young. And it's like, but I know exactly what it's gonna look like for my daughters and my kids and my wife when like if I were to be imprisoned or killed in this situation. Like I thought it was really possible that I was going to be. I was getting death threats that were very specific, and I was like, "Yeah, this could happen." I really thought that dying was a possibility. I know you know about that, and so there's this feeling that you have when you're in that moment, um, and then to struggle to get out of it, and then to get to America, and then like you get to America and you're treated like a criminal, for years. Like, I mean, that's, but that was even before I went to Iran. Like, I started having that trouble when I just released Uncle Sam Goddamn in 2007. I got kicked off of tours, I got kicked off of festivals. I performed the song on TV, and then, like at that time, I played the main stage at Coachella. I was on Conan O'Brien. Uncle Sam Goddamn was one of the first independent videos to get millions of views on YouTube. We had interest from the biggest record labels. The people that signed Eminem and all that kind of stuff were interested. And the only thing I can I mean, I don't look like that kind of star. You do have to have a certain look that I don't have. But it really seems like my insistence on talking about the things that I've talked about, that was the Iraq and Afghanistan years. And
Hmm.
so really specifically talking about that, I've talked about Palestine since the very beginning of my career. And that's the one that I'm suffering for it now. Like I've been completely I went from performing on the main stage at Coachella to I can't get a single festival to book me for the last several years. And I know very specifically the people that are blocking it. They're people I've worked with for 20 years.
That's insane.
I've They've taken pictures with me holding their children because they love me so much, but they're just like they're not booking me, and they gaslight you, and I was just recently uninvited from some college performances because they were worried that it would be dubbed a Palestine rally, and the Muslim students that were organizing to bring me to campus could be deported. So, it's just that's just what it is. Like if you're gonna be a person, if you're gonna have certain virtues and like certain ethics that you want to stand by when they're not popular, there's a reason why. Like we were just saying a second ago, there's a reason why people just pay their taxes and just go along because there's gonna be a major sacrifice. And sometimes people think, well, if I make like I was saying, like sometimes there's people that's like, well, if I make this big sacrifice, like we just lost Asada Shakur. I don't know if you've read Asada Shakur's book, but it would really speak to you.
I'm gonna
Um,
look into it.
yeah, ASSATA, Asada. So she was related to the Shakur family these are the revolutionaries that raised Tupac.
Hmm.
And she was accused of killing a police officer, which it was proven that she could not have done. She didn't do it. Um, but she escaped prison. They broke her out of prison and she fled to Cuba and she lived out her
Damn.
life in Cuba.
Damn. Okay,
So
I'm
this is,
looking that up immediately. That is a
yes,
mirror to my story.
yes,
Fuck.
yes. You're gonna love that story, you
Wow.
know. But so it's like, um, so you learn about these famous icons of the movement, and you're like, man, you kind of feel like, well, you know, maybe if I got to suffer these consequences, at least I'll be an icon of the movement. And then you're not, you know what I mean? Like you're not famous and like nobody even knows about you except for your little community, which is what it is for me too.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, no, I'm not, I thought I would get to be famous. I thought if I would did all this stuff, I'd be famous. And there's way more people that suffer in silence than there are famous ones.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still worth it in my
Yep,
opinion, and I know you feel that way too. I think that's a beautiful note to end this on.
absolutely.
Well, Ollie, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I hope
Much
you
love
have,
and respect to you.
yeah, same to you. I hope you have a good rest of your night. I'm gonna go and see if I can get some progress here on my legal situation. Much love. Have a good one.
Back at you. Peace, peace.